Months later, the results came back. The mitochondrial DNA from the samples did not match anything the lab had on record. The geneticist reported finding mutations that were unknown.
So the Paracas skulls are not Native American? No, they're still Native American. Is that what you needed? They're still Native American. It's just these are alien hybrid Native Americans. They have alien DNA that they don't know what it is. And it's not that they had red hair. Your hair oxidizes from the oxygen after 2,000 fucking years. They got brown eumelanin. So it turns their hair red after the oxygen hits it. When you're dead and your hair dries out and it oxidizes, it turns red. We got brown eumelanin. You got brown eumelanin, you got black eumelanin, and you got red eumelanin. We got brown. Brown still turns red. Red will turn blonde. Black will turn orange if you bleach it. That shit turn orange, yo. That shit turn orange, yo. We go. If you're watching on YouTube, check in. Oh, we, hi, oh, na, we, hi, we, hi, oh, na, oh, we, hi, oh, na, we, hi, we, hi, oh, na. That's my favorite intro to Oyat de Geha. We're not playing nothing now, but actually, this is a good song right here.
Mother's Day has a way of sneaking up on you, but when it does, 1-800-Flowers makes it easy to send mom something beautiful, thoughtful, and worthy of everything she does. Right now, with double blooms from 1-800-Flowers, order 1 dozen roses and get another dozen for free. It's a bigger gesture with fresh, beautiful flowers arranged to make Mother's Day feel as special as she is. Make Mother's Day feel bigger with double blooms at 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM.
Every Nissan Frontier is battle tested. Its frame is twisted. Its door slammed 13,920 times. And its bed drop tested over and over. We do all that to the V6 powered Frontier, so you never have to hold back. Nissan, ranked #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
Sorry, guys. We're almost there. I'm almost ready. Yo, he had his DNA posted 5% Amerindian. Yo, and then he said that because he's got so much Asian in him, that's why that he's ancient Native American. He's got ancient Native American in him because he's got Southeast Asian in him. You gotta be a special kind of stupid for that. It does have a meaning to it. It's Eskania Gaina say this is a new women's shuffle dance. It actually comes from an old lady shuffle. That's a ceremony dance. That's like one of the first dances ever that Sky Woman did on the back of Turtle Island that turned Pangea into a big ass island. I'll turn it off after this song. Go debate Maurice. He can come to my live. Because my live is way more lit. We can look up stuff. Okay. No, that's too big. Hear my cat going nuts. You good? Okay. So what's good, y'all? Let's get it. How's everybody doing?
In any human, primate, or animal known so far. He suggested the team might be dealing with a being very distant from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or even Denisovans. The story exploded across the internet. Headlines appeared in dozens of countries. The phrase non-human DNA was used in articles around the world. And
Native Americans, we have a ancestor with an elongated skull from South America, yo. And that ancestor is likely to be a hybrid of a three-fingered being with the elongated skull, actually. A human hybrid. And I was looking at the handprints there, so there's a wall in South America with 1,000 hands on it. 6-fingered hands, 4-fingered hands, and that's the one that stuck out to me was there was a 4-fingered hand like that. 4-fingered, not 3-fingered, 4-fingered. Maybe, might have been Peru.
Mainstream science was forced to respond. Critics pointed out that the samples had come from skulls that had been on open display in a museum for decades, touched by curators, handled by tourists. Contamination was not just possible, it was practically guaranteed. The unnamed geneticist never published the results in any peer-reviewed journal. He never came forward publicly. The entire case rested on a single anonymous claim with no scientific paper behind it. So a second round of testing was launched. This time, samples were sent to 3 separate laboratories, 1 in Canada, 2 in the United States. The samples included hair and bone powder drilled directly from inside the foramen magnum, an area less likely to be contaminated by surface handling. The results were not what mainstream science expected. 3 of the hair samples returned mitochondrial haplogroup H2A, a genetic signature found primarily in Eastern Europe. The bone powder from the most extreme elongated skull returned haplogroup T2B, a lineage concentrated from the British Isles to the Levant, including the Fertile Crescent. 2 more samples returned U2E and H1A, both linked to populations from the Black Sea and the Caspian region. These results
sound
made no
okay,
sense,
guys?
because 3,000 years ago, when these individuals were
it up
buried
or
in the
down?
Peruvian desert, Eastern European DNA had no business being on the South American Pacific coast. There was no known migration route. No.
So OG says, I know someone with 7 fingers. His nickname was 7-Up. With on one hand or both hands.
Archaeological evidence of contact. Nothing to explain how genetic markers from across the Atlantic and the Mediterranean.
Yeah, look at these boats down in Peru, Patagonia. These people are also descendants of giants. Like, if you look at that guy's face right there, hold on. This guy right here looks like he has giantism in the face. I'm not even kidding, yo. Look at the guy standing up. He looks like he's got giantism in his face. And he's probably not even a giant. He's probably just regular size. But he definitely, look at his face. He's got like a real big chin. Real big chin like that. Real big cheekbones. Like if you look at people with with giantism from like Egypt and the Middle East and India and all over the world. They look like that. Their faces kind of look like that, yo. And this is Patagonia, the land of the giants. America is the land of the giants, yo. 100%.
Mediterranean could have ended up inside the bones of a pre-Columbian elite buried in the Peruvian desert. Mainstream geneticists insisted the only explanation was contamination. Critics insisted the contamination explanation was being
These
used
were alien
to
launch
dismiss
pads.
inconvenient data.
The Nazca lines. So the Nazca lines here in the Adena and Hopewell mound culture in the Ohio River Valley, some of my ancestors, they're finding some of these Nazca lines in these geoglyphs up here in North America. On a whole nother continent. It's the square with the circle next to it. That's not just two continents. That's on every continent. So actually people that look like us are on every single continent. We dominate the earth, people. White people are not the majority and neither are black people. Actually, white people and black people are the newest people. They're like the aliens. Everybody else is related.
The debate raged, and then a peer-reviewed study was published in the prestigious scientific journal Cell that should have ended the controversy. A team...
And if you're Native American, yes, you got this inside of you. That's why you got a real long face. That's why you got a real long head. That's why you got a real big forehead, yo. Yo! You know what? We got one of our chiefs. Our chief. We got a chief, and his name means real big forehead. That's what his name means, yo. Hold on. Seneca, chief, real big forehead. On Seneca, no, chief, big forehead. Okay. No. No. Now we're gonna have to go look for it now. That's our first hunt of the class. We're gonna go find it now. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. I should have put it on that, but we're gonna do this now. Okay, and then here. I have to do this. The Goji hut the guy. Okay, let's find that. Hold on. Yeah, I heard this Saturday they're having condolence for a chief for my uncle. My uncle's spot. My uncle Darren, he was a chief. Okay, here we go. Hey! He keeps them awake. Yeah, they're electing a chief Saturday in Tonawanda, I guess. Gotta find the meanings though, yo. There's one that means real big forehead.
And then there is the hair. Several Paracas mummies have been recovered with hair that is naturally red and naturally blonde. In a region where
Okay, so we're real big forehead, yo. You never see Native Americans. Bonnie Banks said, "You never see Native Americans being destructive and violent. A beautiful, peaceful people." Facts. And they said we are merciless Indian savages, huh? Actually, I'm a killer, but don't push me. The pretendian's gonna be like, "Oh, you're stealing our culture!" The Goji needs to hut the guy. Yes, she does. Let's see what they got here. Okay. Pine tree trees. Look, Israel. Figures Israel Jimerson. Jimerson. Look, that's probably when it went from Jemison to Jiminson to Jimerson. Israel. We got people like with the names Israel, Abrams, Isaacs, Jacobs. Come on. Okay, here we go. Look, Buffalo Creek. These are all Buffalo Creek Senecas, y'all. Look, these are the names. These are Seneca titles. No. Kanokai. Kanokai. Sogo. Joa. Wait. Sedenwa. Did the names change? Sorry, I'm looking at something. Ganongai is the same. Seneca White. So I got Captain Jones. Yeah, Captain was a name. Yeah, you got Captain Jones. My mom told me about him. Said we got somebody named Captain on the res from way back when. Having the 45th title on the roll call. Ganyadayo. Look, Ganyadayo. It's Ganyadayo. That's Ganyadayo. Yep. So Gateon, yes. So go. Child Dagown, yes. Child Dagown, yes. Okay, Skanyadayo and Child Dagown, yes. Kanogay, Miss Hanyan, yeah. Bear. I thought that was the same. So Denon Watt. Different here. It goes from won'ts to what. Sedenion won'ts. Sedenion won'ts. Right here. This was my uncle's title. Right here. My uncle passed away 2 months ago. He was a chief. Darren Jimerson. Gahan. But that's his title right there. And they're Saturday in Tonawanda, I think they're electing a new chief for his spot. But I think this is it right here. It changed. It went from Sedeno Won'ts, because it's a bear, right? Sedenon Wat. Sedeno Won'ts. Sedeno Wat. Sedeno Won'ts. Sedeno Won'ts. Sedeno Wat. But yes, you got two guns. Hudson, Johnson, Luke, White, Charles, Jones. Charles. So that's one you never hear. Lindsay, you don't hear that one no more. I don't hear that no more. Lindsay and Charles. Yep, those are first last names. Lindsay, Charles, Edwards, Jacob, John, George, Williams, Thomas. If it's a first name, it's a last name. Definitely. But we need to find out the one that says real big forehead, yo. Bear Clan is said differently than Bear, right? Bear is Nook White. I don't know how you say Bear Clan. Hold on. Go on my app. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's different. I'm looking for the title of He Has a Big Forehead because we're watching this right now. And I think there might be a connection because our people, the Seneca specifically, we fought off stone giants that had elongated skull, right? You can look up, hold on. So my people, we fought off stone giants, right? And if you look at all these depictions of these stone giants that my people fought off, these depictions were drawn by my own people too. They all have elongated skull, all these giants. So look at their skulls. So look at these guys. Again, another depiction. This is like the original depiction right here of what they look like with the skulls. Come on, y'all. But anyway, we got a chief title, I'm pretty sure, that says he has a big forehead or something like that, yo. I'm pretty sure there's a chief title that says he has a big forehead, yo. Okay, yeah, look, population distribution by sex from age partial census of the Seneca on the Buffalo Creek Reservation. This is Seneca that lived here in the city, where I'm at right now. Check this out, babe. It's a population chart.
Oh, yeah?
From the 1800s of Senecas that live here in the city of Buffalo. Yeah. Like I said, we started this shit. Started by the missionary Asher Wright. She was the one that wrote language, that came up with the alphabet. I'm pretty sure. She didn't come up with the language, she just wrote an alphabet for it. That's why we got a Latin alphabet, because we didn't have an alphabet. We had our own symbols. We had hieroglyphics. Actually, that's where I can get that. I can look for that. We're looking for the one that we'll find it. Hopefully this is it. Is there anything on here? What the fuck? Okay, where's the names? What the fudge, yo? Yeah, this is our language. We had hieroglyphics. It's probably hard for you guys to even see. God damn, y'all. Here we go. Yeah, look at all these Seneca titles, yo. Yeah, yo, these are all Seneca titles. And they say we only got 8, 7 or 8. These are all fucking chiefs, yo, of the Seneca. Oh, let me get that again. Get a screenshot of that. Yeah, yo, I came up with a language too for my people. It's called Skydome language. You just seen the Israelites calling white people the red clay? Yo, I've seen white people try to say they were Adam because Adam meant ginger and ruddy, like he got blushed, like he turned pink. uh Funny, huh? It was like, no, you guys are the newest. You guys would be the newest because it just makes sense like that, you know? I don't got. Look, it's all wolf, swan. Swan? What? Chicken hawk. What? Swan? You guys see this? Hmm. There we go. We're gonna post that real quick. We're gonna post that real quick. But still, what? Captain Jones, Joseph Silverheels, James Robinson, Owen Blacksnake, Walter Thompson, Jacob Johnson, Enk. What is Enk? Unknown? Is that what that means? I don't know. No English name. Runner under the preceding. Sub-sachem of the Senecas. Sachem of the Longhouse of the Six Nations. Sage Jawa. Skundi Wadi. Skundi Wandi. It looks like Skundi Wandi. Oh shit, there's a part 2. Come on, Gunnet.
Where the indigenous population has consistently had black hair for thousands of years. The hair is not bleached by the sun, not damaged by burial chemistry. It is naturally pigmented at the root. Some samples have even been described as significantly thinner than the hair of any Native American population on record. For decades, these features were treated as curiosities, strange details mentioned in passing, ignored by mainstream archaeology because the consensus was already settled. The Paracas were Native Americans. The skulls were the result of binding. Case closed, until someone decided to test the DNA. A researcher working at a small museum on the Paracas Peninsula obtained samples from 5 elongated skulls, bone fragments carefully drilled from the back of each cranium. The samples were sent to a private genetics laboratory in the United States. The geneticist's identity was kept anonymous. Months later, the results came back. The mitochondrial DNA from the samples did not match anything the lab had on record. The geneticist reported finding mutations that were unknown in any human, primate, or animal known so far.
Have you heard of that guy, Children of the Sun? No. No, why? What's up?
He suggested the team might be dealing with a being
Thank you
very
for the
distant
follow.
from Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, or even Denisovans. The story exploded across the internet. Headlines appeared in dozens of countries. The phrase non-human DNA was used in articles around the world, and mainstream science was forced to respond. Critics pointed out that the samples had come from skulls that had been on open display in a museum for decades, touched by curators, handled by tourists. Contamination was not just possible, it was practically guaranteed. The unnamed geneticist never published the results in any peer-reviewed journal. He never came forward publicly. The entire case rested on a single anonymous claim with no scientific paper behind it. So a second round of testing was launched. This time, samples were sent to 3 separate laboratories, one in Canada, 2 in the United States. The samples included hair and bone powder drilled directly from inside the foramen magnum, an area less likely to be contaminated by surface handling. The results were not what mainstream science expected. 3 of the hair samples returned mitochondrial haplogroup H2A, a genetic signature found primarily in Eastern Europe. The bone powder from the most extreme elongated skull returned haplogroup T2B, a lineage concentrated from the British Isles to the Levant, including the Fertile Crescent. 2 more samples returned U2E and H1A, both linked to populations from the Black Sea and the Caspian region. These results made no sense, because 3,000 years ago, when these individuals were buried in the Peruvian desert, Eastern European DNA had no business being on the South American Pacific coast. There was no known migration route, no archaeological evidence of contact, nothing to explain how genetic markers from across the Atlantic and the Mediterranean could have ended up inside the bones of a pre-Columbian elite buried in the Peruvian desert. Mainstream geneticists insisted the only explanation was contamination. Critics insisted the contamination explanation was being used to dismiss inconvenient data. The debate raged, and then a peer-reviewed study was published in the prestigious scientific journal Cell. That should have ended the controversy. A team led by Harvard geneticist David Reich analyzed 89 ancient genomes from across the Andes, including individuals from Paracas burial regions. The results were unambiguous. Every single sample returned standard Native American haplogroups. A, B, C, D, no European DNA, no Middle Eastern DNA, no mysterious lineages, just Native American. Case closed, or so it seemed. But here is what continues to puzzle researchers. The Cell study did not specifically target the elongated skulls themselves. It analyzed individuals from the broader Paracas region.
And that's the bear title. It is that, yo. It was my uncle's title. I just asked my uncle, I said, which one means
the results
he has a
confirmed
big
that the
forehead?
DNA was
And
indeed
that's
human.
it, yo.
No foreign profiles, no alien sequences, standard human
That's it. My uncle's title. And then they want my cousin Solon to take it. That's what's up, yo.
markers. So how do we explain the European haplogroups reported by the independent labs? The mainstream answer remains contamination. The fringe answer remains pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. Neither side has been able to fully refute the other, because the original samples that returned the strange results have never been retested under controlled conditions, and the laboratories that produced them have never publicly disclosed their identities. What we are left with is a mystery that science cannot yet close. The Paracas existed. They modified their skulls. They were Native Americans. That much is now certain. But unexplained anomalies remain. The hair color, the cranial capacity, the genetic results from independent labs that no one can fully account for. And one more discovery that mainstream archaeology has only recently been forced to confront. Drone surveys conducted across the Palpa region revealed something extraordinary. Geoglyphs, massive figures carved into the desert hillsides, predating the famous Nazca lines by centuries, and in some cases, up to 1,000 years. Some of these figures show human-like beings with elongated heads. The Paracas appear to have been depicting themselves, or someone they remembered, on a colossal scale across the desert. This was a culture that performed surgery on living human skulls, with a survival rate of 40%. While the ancient Greeks were still struggling with basic medicine, a culture whose textiles remain among the finest ever produced by any civilization in human history, a culture whose dead were buried with rituals so elaborate they continue to be studied today, and whose skulls, nearly 100 years after their discovery, still cannot be fully explained. What does this mean for our understanding of the ancient world? It suggests that human history is not the clean, orderly story we have been taught, that the rise of civilization in the Americas happened independently and in ways we do not yet understand. Cultures emerged, flourished, and disappeared, leaving behind clues that defy our modern categories. The Paracas were not aliens, they were not a separate species, but they were also not simply ordinary. They represent something we are still learning to read, a society that pushed the boundaries of biology, medicine, and identity in ways no other culture in human history has ever matched. And here's the deeper question. If a culture 3,000 years ago could...
Yeah, look at that. That's Hindu. Sanskrit. They try to say it's fucking Hebrew, though. Hold on, I gotta add stuff to this.
Practice cranial modification on this scale, perform brain surgery with this success rate, weave textiles of this complexity, and depict their world in geoglyphs visible only from the sky. What else were they capable of that we have not yet found? What else lies buried beneath the sands of the Paracas Peninsula, in tombs that have not yet been opened, in cemeteries that have not yet been mapped? Because here is the truth that mainstream science rarely admits. Most of the 429 mummy bundles recovered by Julio Tello have never been fully studied. They sit in museum storage in Lima, wrapped exactly as they were when they emerged from the desert sand. Some have not been opened in nearly 100 years. The DNA inside them has never been sequenced. The bones inside them have never been scanned. The hair inside them has never been tested. The Paracas mystery is not a case that has been solved. It is a case that has barely been opened. And every time science develops a new tool, a
Real big forehead, huh?
more sensitive sequencer, a more precise scanner, a better forensic technique, researchers return to these skulls and find something they could not see before. The story of the Paracas is still being written. The next chapter could change everything we think we know about ancient civilization in the Americas. If you found this discovery as fascinating as we did, consider subscribing. Because somewhere right now, inside a sealed mummy bundle in a Lima museum, lies the answer to one of the greatest mysteries in human history, waiting to be found. There is a shallow rock shelter carved into a sandstone cliff in the remote wilderness.
Kelly had a daunting task untangling the knots of changing associations over time. He gave some examples of how associations that don't seem at first glance to correspond to each other may have some relation. For example, a Pipil mine list from Guatemala has turtle in the 19th position. A Malay list also has turtle in the 19th position. Other Mayan and Aztec lists have lightning storm in the 19th position. A Hindu list has a female dog in the 19th position. The correspondence of lightning storm, female dog, and turtle would normally be considered to be discrepant, Kelly wrote. However, the goddess of the 19th Aztec day was Chantico, a fire goddess, turned by the other gods into a dog. The concept of a lightning dog is found in Asia throughout the areas of Buddhist influence, and is also found in Mexico. A Tibetan manuscript actually shows a female lightning dog seated on a turtle, thus nicely combining the concepts associated with the 19th position of the animal lists. The Mayan Madrid Codex also depicts a dog seated on a turtle, a biological oddity. In addition to animal or element associations, both Kelly and David P. Kelly noted linguistic similarities between the day names along with other supporting evidence. David B. Kelly wrote, "Perhaps one of the most tantalizing aspects of the comparison of the Mesoamerican systems of numerals lies in linguistics, where it can be demonstrated that the words reflecting vigesimal orders of magnitude in certain Maya dialects, and the words reflecting decimal orders of magnitude in certain Chinese dialects are almost interchangeable." Kelly concluded, "In my opinion, the correspondences that I have discussed forcefully indicate cultural contact of some sort between the people of Eurasia and the people of ancient Guatemala or nearby Mexico." He surmised that such contact may have occurred around the late 1st or early 2nd century AD. He said his conclusions are disputable, but are the best solutions that I've been able to find. And that concludes the article. I'll link that below if you want to go check that out for yourself. Now, I find all this evidence for contact between China and Central America very compelling, and it does also show a similarity to other cultures who use dragon symbolism and have similar calendar systems. The final piece of evidence I want to point out is in the DNA studies done on the people of Mexico and Central America. The genetics of modern peoples are slightly difficult to make conclusions on due to the mixing of people during colonial and modern times. However, based on DNA studies, historians and researchers have come to the conclusion that Native Americans, including the Mesoamericans, have DNA that comes from northern Siberia, Mongolia, and northern China region. These were said to be the Neolithic travelers who crossed the Bering Strait during the last ice age sometime around 10,000 years ago. But what if this Asian DNA came to the Americas later than that? What if they had contact with the mythological dynasties of ancient China? This would explain the Northern Asian DNA in Native Americans just as well as the Bering Strait crossing theory. And it would explain why we see such astounding similarities between these two faraway cultures. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I've been posting a lot on the Patreon lately. It's basically a place where I compile all my research and post all the videos I watch while researching. And it's only $3 to subscribe, so it's not bad at all. Feel free to message me on there as well, and be sure to stay tuned.
Get real-world experience for the world of music and audio at Full Sail University. Recording,
What's up?
producing.
Have you ever paused to consider the uncanny architectural similarities between ancient cultures?
So look at all of them. Every single one of these places, people look like this. The people look like this. They are not black. They are not white. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that bothers you, that we are waking up. We have relatives at all four corners of the planet, people. The red race is the original race. White people, black people are new people. You guys are the newest. You guys came after us. That's why all these places, right? All these places, they're all indigenous people that look like us. Just so you know. Just so you know. Every single one of these people, the people there are red. The people there are red and semi-Asiatic. Straight up, every single place. The Mayans and Egyptians are related. Indonesians and Cambodians are related. Same with all the pyramids all over the planet. Everybody's related.
That were supposedly isolated from one another by vast oceans, thousands of miles, and centuries of time. Isn't it curious that mainstream science and archaeology rarely, if ever, confronts these similarities head-on? Why doesn't mainstream science talk about this more often? I mean, it's so obvious when you stand back and take a look. It's staring us in the face, and yet the professionals are not really talking about it. I mean, let's start with the most obvious striking examples. Let's take a look at the pyramids, for example. The step pyramids are found in ancient Egypt, pre-Columbian Peru, and even Cambodia. In fact, we have pyramids all over the world. These aren't small, vague resemblances. We're talking about massive, geometrically sophisticated structures built in layers often aligned with celestial bodies and constructed using techniques that modern engineers still marvel at. Is this just a coincidence? Or could it suggest a deeper, more interconnected human past? Mainstream historians might argue that pyramids are just the simplest way to stack stones high, but that doesn't explain the uncanny engineering precision, the astronomical alignment, or the spiritual significance embodied in these monuments by cultures worlds apart. Another strange similarity is this. Take a look at this. This is the trapezoidal doorway. These doorways were found across a few different ancient civilizations. However, it's strongly associated with the Incas, pre-Columbian Andes, and also across the Egyptian civilizations. And we see this in Machu Picchu in Peru. Many of the doorways and windows are trapezoidal, a hallmark of Inca engineering. The wider base and narrower top helped resist seismic activity in earthquake-prone regions. So it obviously makes sense why this type of structure was used. We also have it here in Peru at Sacsayhuaman. The massive fortress above Cusco has trapezoidal doors integrated into Cyclopean stonework. Ollantaytambo in Peru, doorways here in temples and palaces are trapezoidal, often with finely fitted stones. Again, in Tiahuanaco in Bolivia, pre-Inca monumental site where same structured doorways and openings influenced later Inca design. Then we have across the other side of the world, the Egyptian architecture. If you take a look at the old kingdom and temples, some false doors and interior passages show the same narrowing door structure. While less pronounced than in the Andes, we still see them in entrances. Across Europe, we have the Mycenaean and Minoan structures from Greece and the Bronze Age. Here we've got the Treasury of Atreus, which is a Mycenaean architecture, monumental doorway, slightly trapezoidal, topped by a relieving triangle. We have the Minoan palaces in Crete. Some entrances use tapered door frames, creating a trapezoidal outline. Other examples also found...
Yo, so why do you got... It looks like, if you look at Jesus Christ eating at the Last Supper, you got them eating inside of a Mayan pyramid. Did you know that? The Last Supper, you have Jesus eating the Last Supper inside of a Mayan pyramid. You guys want to see? Oh. Okay. You see those 3 doors right there? Right here. They already did it for you. They already did it for you right here. Boom. They already did it for you. Look at that. In your fucking face, yo. Those are the same fucking people. The red people. The original race of the fucking planet. White people and black people are the newest people. They are not the original people. And that's not the color of Jesus Christ either. Native Americans, Egyptians, Indians from India, Cambodians, we are all related to one another. Polynesians, Hawaiians, Aboriginals, the red race is the original race. Yo, come on. Now look up the Last Supper. I want you to look up the Last Supper on your phone. Look it up. Look at the doors behind them. I want you to look up the Last Supper on your phone and look up the doors behind them. Did you look it up yet? Put a 1 in the chat if you looked it up. Let's go. Okay, let's see. Hold on. Okay, let's see. Last Supper. Oh, look at the doors. Look at the fucking doors. Look at the doors. And look, it looks like they're at the top of a fucking pyramid, yo. Come on. Come on, look at that. Look at that. Come on, yo. Those family crests were added later, yo. You can tell. That's not even part of the original drawing. Those family crests, those people added them later, yo. You can tell they did that because there's some with different family crest. Because that's not even part of the original drawing. It's the family crests are not as good as the painting. I'm an artist, so I can tell. I'm a tattoo artist. The family crests aren't a part of the original painting. The original painting is just them. Yeah, and it shows that they're elevated too. It shows that they're elevated. And I bet you the ceiling, those boxes on the ceiling, I bet you those weren't there. That was added later too. It was always said that natives are the chosen ones. Yes, that's why they call us Indians. It comes from Indios, in God. They said we looked like Roman gods, and when we spoke our language, it was so pure, it sounded poetic. But yeah, look at that, yo. Come on. Get it right. White people or black people did not build these. They couldn't have. They don't even make up a quarter of the planet. White people are the minority of the planet. So are black people. People that look like us are the majority of the planet. And they have tricked us over here. They're lying to us. They don't want us to know about Eastern knowledge. They don't believe life started in Africa. That's a fucking theory, yo. Life didn't start in Africa. You don't come from a black person. You come from a red person. That's what you come from. You come from a red person. All life began on Turtle Island. You guys want to see? Pangea? Look, on. Right there. There's Pangea for you. That's Turtle Island right there. You see the tail? That's where life began. There you go. That's Turtle Island, people. Just so you know. There you go. That's a better one. Turtle Island. Yes, the original humans were not black or white. Black people mutated to look like that from the sun, from the third age sun. So during the third age, indigenous knowledge is the foundation. Indigenous knowledge and teachings is the foundation to modern day science. So the elites, right, the winners of war, write the history books. The elites are lying to everybody. They want you thinking life started in Africa to keep you disconnected from your roots. They don't want you to know that you come from the original humans. You got giant in you. You got Atlantean monkey people in you. You got bird people in you. You got serpent people in you. That's why in your brain, you have a mammal part of your brain, a primate part of your brain and a reptilian part of your brain. That makes you sapien. We are Homo sapien sapiens. And not only that, you have Homo Neanderthal, Homo Denisovan, and 2 ghost archaic ancestors, a Y population that we share with Polynesians and oceanic people from over there. So you got ties to these pyramids in Cambodia and Indonesia and India as well. Those are our relatives. Also the Egyptians. Egypt was just an Atlantean colony, an Atlantis colony. That's all that was. That's why the ancient Egyptians look like the Mayans. The Mayans and the Egyptians are related. So the red race has been life started in the Americas. You can look up where the first mammals and primates originated. They'll tell you North America. Plus all the mounds. They find 100-million-year-old artifacts here in the Americas. So if people were allowed to dig in the mounds, and they have, the Smithsonian covered it up, they find dinosaur bones that are really dragon bones. Then they'll find mammoth bones, but those are really giant bones. You ever seen a mammoth skeleton? Look at this. So they're finding all these mammoths in America, but they don't have no elephants here, right? They're finding all these mammoths in America, but they don't have no elephants here. And then these mammoth bones, look at their feet. They got hands and feet, fingers. Yeah, yo, that's what I'm saying, yo. That's what I'm saying. They probably found like 1 or 2 mammoths and they just 3D print the skulls. But these are actually giant remains. So this is land of the giants. It has been documented, all the remains found in the Americas. So check this out. This is the map of giant remains found in the America. Those are all giants that they found here in America. The Smithsonian, yeah, look at that. All giants. This is land of the giants. This is land of the reptiles too. So Turtle Island also has the most turtles on it. The most variety of turtles, right? Also, you got tons of serpent worship here in the Americas. So anybody that has serpent worship and their solstice worship, like your ceremonies go off the moon, we're all related. Because the moon, so even in Africa, they believe that 2 serpent reptilian twins, right? The twins theory is common throughout the whole planet. That these 2 reptilian serpent twins came here and created man, and the moon is actually an egg for a big white dragon. And I've even heard that even in the middle of the earth that there's big white dragons too. So you know how chickens descend from dinosaurs, right? Or T-Rex. Now imagine what we descend from. In the Aztec creation story, they say that in the first world they made the giants, right? But they were lazy and they just sat around. They didn't do anything. They were too lazy. They didn't worship or anything. So God got rid of them. The second world, they made people. They became disrespectful. They turned them into monkeys and the winds blew them away. Third world, they made bird people. There's all different kinds of people they made. So this is what, so Central American, Mayan, and Aztec, this is what they say makes you what? Giant from the first world, monkey people Atlantean monkey people, clay people, bird people, fish people, right? Human being, sea monster, Cro-Magnon, the seafaring race. What else? Plant people, tree people, wood people, and then fish people. So that's what makes you up. They took the bones from all those things and they were all smashed up, and that's why people are different heights and all that. But they took all that and took their own blood, their own DNA, added it to it. For Ungwe people, they added too much stardust for me. They put a lot of stardust when they made us. But that's what indigenous people say down Central America. Those are what makes up a human today. Every group traces back to L3. No. Nah. That's what they teach you, bro. And you know what? That person, and if it was that L3 wasn't a black person or a white person, black people came in the third age from the third sun. That sun was a little bit too powerful. So people got trapped on the surface. You guys were surface dwellers for a little bit. And then you mixed into the second age people, the Atlantean, the bipedal monkey blood. That's why you guys are more iron blooded. Like my people were more copper blooded. We got the serpent blood in us. You guys got the monkey blood in you. That makes you more iron blooded. You also, your ancestors got stuck on the surface during the third age too and burned you. Not everybody comes from black people. You guys mutated to look like that. Because if everybody came from you, it would all look like you. Everybody came from Native Americans. Because if you look at the ancient, everybody, they all look like ancient Native Americans. Everybody looked like Native Americans. And then once the whole planet is interglobally mixed and everybody has the same amount of DNA, everybody's going to look Native American again. That's the original human being. Yo, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that bothers you guys. The whole planet will look Native American. And some people will call me a radical. Some people will say I'm crazy. But when you speak facts, in this day and age, yeah, people look at you like you're crazy.
Across in Turkey, where we have some city gates, such as the Hattusa, that uses a trapezoidal passageway.
Should we be taking copper instead of iron? It depends on what kind of person you are. If you're black, yeah, you're going to want to take more iron and vitamin D because you don't get enough sunlight. Your skin blocks the sun. It rejects the sun. It's honestly because your ancestors aren't. There's a couple theories for that. For one, you might not even be from this planet, bro, because there's black people in Africa. The Dogon, they say they come from Sirius B. And then you got Vusa Mazulu Credo Mutua, who is a Bantu or a Zulu medicine man. He says that their people came from Mars, yo. And that's not the first time I've heard your people come from Mars. That's why they don't let black people be astronauts. That's why they don't let y'all be astronauts, is because y'all are from another planet, yo. That sounds powerful, honestly. Yeah, you know what it is, dude. That's why they don't let you guys join NASA or anything, is because you guys are actually might be from another planet. I've been wanting to look up something else. want to hear the Cambodian creation
Once,
story.
a long time ago, there was a powerful hermit named Lokta Moniye Se. He had 3 promising students: Moni Mekala, the brilliant goddess of the seas; Vorachon, princely manifestation of the earth; and Rieme So, a
There you go again. The 4 beings, yo. You got the 4 beings, the 4 sky dwellers, or you got the 4 winds. This is common throughout all cultures. This is what I'm saying. So, you think they really went to the moon? No, I don't think they went around the moon. The fuck? Unless the moon is super close, I don't think they went around the fucking moon. That's so weird, yo. I don't think they went around the moon. I really don't. I'm sorry. I think they went up there for a real long time, but I don't think they went around the fucking moon. You really think they went around the moon? They lied about going to the moon last time they went. Yo, so they don't have a fucking creation story? Yo, they're Naga. They got dragon and serpent worship too. And then those suits that they wear, that helmet, that pointy thing, that's an antenna. And then they got a whole energy suit that they wear, yo. They wear straight up energy fucking suits. That's why they don't wear shoes with those energy suits. They're barefoot, actually. And actually, I need to get my braid going, y'all. Forgot. Getting hungry.
Until recently, most paleoanthropologists believed that a widespread Middle Pleistocene taxon called Homo heidelbergensis, sometimes subdivided, with African representatives labelled Homo rhodesiensis, gradually evolved into modern humans in Africa. The key fossils anchoring that picture were the Kabwe skull from Zambia and the Bodo cranium from Ethiopia, sometimes called Homo bodoensis. But you may be surprised or even shocked to learn that these African fossils are not the ancestors of Homo sapiens, as was once speculated. These fossils, broadly grouped within what some researchers call Middle Pleistocene hominins, seem to embody an intermediate condition: bigger brains than Homo erectus, but still strongly built faces and brow ridges, a mosaic of archaic and more modern features. For a long time, most paleoanthropologists supported a version of this model, arguing that Homo rhodesiensis represented the ancestor modern humans. That picture has unraveled in recent years for 2 main reasons. First, the chronology has shifted dramatically. Second, the morphology, especially of the face, no longer fits a simple ancestral model. New dating of key fossils, combined with refined analysis of craniofacial growth and the modern human face, has forced a re-evaluation. The result is that many researchers and others now treat the African hominins as a side branch, rather than the direct lineage leading to Homo sapiens. They were widespread and probably interrelated populations, but their faces, their evolutionary trajectory, and their late persistence make them unlikely to be our immediate ancestors. The age problem came into sharp focus with the redating of the Kabwe skull. Long thought to be about 500,000 years old, comfortably old enough to sit at the root of our species, Kabwe was reanalyzed using modern uranium series and electron spin resonance techniques directly on the cranial bone. The results produced a best age estimate of 299,000 years. This was a shock. The skull turned out to be much younger than assumed. Instead of predating early modern humans, Kabwe is roughly the same age as the oldest Homo sapiens fossils, such as those from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco and Florisbad in South Africa. Yet Kabwe shows none of the derived modern human facial features. It retains a huge continuous brow ridge, supraorbital torus, a projecting mid-face without a canine fossa, a long, low brain case with a receding forehead, and massive zygomatic bones. If this specimen were truly ancestral to Homo sapiens, one would expect at least a hint of the globular brain case and retracted mid-face seen in the earliest modern humans. Its young age means that fully archaic, non-sapiens morphologies persisted in Africa at the same time as early members of our own species, evidence for modern human evolution outside of Africa. What's more, Kabwe is not alone. The Bodo cranium from Ethiopia, long cited as a bridge
Civilizations in the Americas were locked in isolation. Died out around this time period as well, such as the Tiwanaku, the Wari culture, the Toltec, the Tarona culture, the Nicarao and Chorotega cultures, the Chachapoya culture, the Thule and Dorset in northern Canada, the Fremont culture, and probably
What? No way.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. Today is going to be one of those videos that I really think that everyone should take time to watch. I don't really do any marketing on my channel. I'm not trying to ever sell you anything or even convince you of anything, because a lot of the times I believe the photographs, the theories, and the discussion or dissection of the current narrative really speaks for itself. But in the case of the topics that we're covering today, these are going to be some of the most important ideas, theories, concepts that we have covered in the entire history of my channel. And when we bring things full circle at the end of the video, I think everyone who watches this video until the end will have an entirely new perspective on America and American history. It's time to uncover something major. Per usual, with the topics that we're covering today, something this instrumental to the new narrative that was being painted during the 19th century, it will become key to tie all of these topics together. We're going to go through an assortment of different things before coming full circle at the end of the video. And I will try to address these topics with finesse. However, if we zoom out and examine the bigger picture here, as I will attempt to do for you today, it becomes clear that there was a concerted effort being put into place to quite literally diminish and in most ways effectively erase the history of certain groups of people in America, while simultaneously promoting a viewpoint which focused solely on giving credit for the greatest achievements to certain colonists. This included a cornucopia of monumental fortresses which existed in America, many becoming star fortresses which, since the digital age, have been determined and proven to have been indigenous American in origin, or at least existed here.
See, isn't this what I was just talking about? How all the star forts were built on top of our mounds, our sacred burial grounds, and that's why these old forts are haunted and all that?
As partially fortified sites before the Europeans arrived. The question then becomes, why did these large settlements, the fortifications of the indigenous people found nationwide, why were they all seemingly confiscated, for lack of a better term, and then allegedly transformed into more colonial-style fortifications that were then properly documented? It's like the earlier structures had to be forcibly abandoned within the written history before the new narrative could be applied and taught. For example, the fortress at Pittsburgh, known to the French as Fort Duquesne, had been a location of indigenous occupation for hundreds of years before that, with evidence showcased in dozens of large burial mounds, earthworks, and entire earthen fortresses.
This is exactly what I was talking about, too. He must be watching me or something. This guy's got to be watching me or something. But yes, the mounds were built on top of our or the Star Fort, they used Indians to do these. This is when I say Iroquoian speaking natives are brick laying Native Americans. Yes, we are still like that to this day. We built New York City, Twin Towers, the new ones and the old ones, Empire State Building, Brooklyn Bridge, Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, Niagara Falls, Schenectady, Oswego, Watertown, Utica, Albany. Excuse me. The Brick Lane Native Americans, your Empire Native Americans, your builders of the longhouse. They build longhouses 3 stories tall, a quarter mile long sometimes by clan. And then they had gated communities and villages. So Seneca is definitely descendants of the Adena and Hopewell mound building culture.
Which once dotted the area. One of these star-shaped fortresses was then further renovated by the French to form the star fort known as Duquesne. However, the history books don't exactly add up. The British marched on Fort Duquesne, looking to remove French influence, but realistically, the British really needed to remove the indigenous from the stronghold, which was on their trade route. The literal history in a nutshell.
Look at that Indian. Look at that Indian, yo. We know he's got his skin painted, but this is what I'm talking about. Where's the pretendians at? Where they at, though? Where they at, though?
Basically will claim the indigenous built thousands of these different earthworks around America, including star-shaped forts in Pittsburgh, and they traded here for hundreds of years. Then,
your Iroquoian speaking natives did this.
French arrived to the area that would become Pittsburgh, negotiated with the indigenous, and further fortified the indigenous trade fortress at...
Oh, look at the river. The Allegheny. You got the Allegheny Senecas too, right? What does that say? Monongahela.
Pittsburgh, forming Star Fort Duquesne, made of mason. Then, the British arrived here. They fortified a nearby massive mound that was known as Grant's Hill before capturing Fort Duquesne. Then the British are said to have...
So just so you know, hill and mound are interchangeable. You heard it himself. That mound, that Indian mound, and then they named it Grant's Hill. Also, Seneca are great hill people, big hill people. Onondaga. You got Onondaga that are Onondaga. They are Onondaga. They are great people of the hills.
Have completely destroyed Star Fort Duquesne before founding their own, even larger Star Fort right next to it, known as Fort Pitt.
Looks like
the city of Pittsburgh was named for and developed around Fort.
Looks like a snowflake even too. Everything matches everything in nature.
Fort Pitt. Once Pittsburgh got too big and people began to ask questions, the mound that was known as Grant's Hill, which also contained Pittsburgh's oldest masonry, was removed. All mounds and evidence of indigenous occupation was gradually erased from the city, with some instances literally seeing the history being altered right before our eyes. You may ask, how could that have been possible when hundreds, if not thousands, of witnesses would have been...
Yeah, maybe like their individual log cabins go, but fucking Empire State Building, the buildings and all that, yeah. And the Star Forts, yeah, the foundation to all that, yeah, it came from us, bro.
Living to see all of this.
New York City is one of the oldest cities on the planet. Life began in New York. The oldest forest is in New York. It's called Gilboa Forest.
And the answer, sadly, as in most cases throughout history, is power and money. Government forces created insane asylums for the Europeans. Government forces created re-education schools for the indigenous and the freedmen. In the 19th century, one infamous school was founded in Pennsylvania, just across the Susquehanna River, not too far from where I am today. But this school became the premier re-education academy for all Indigenous children throughout the nation, with official numbers claiming.
So my great-grandfather went to Carlisle. He was taken and went to Carlisle, and he ran away from Carlisle too. He went there to learn carpenting skills. But yeah, the school unalived the Indian, saved the man.
Over 7,800 children attended the school during its short 39 years of operation. However, according to residents of the area, contemporary reports from the time period, and some whistleblowers from inside the affected tribes, these estimates can vary wildly towards the higher end, with some claiming tens of thousands of Indigenous children were forcibly taken from their tribal homes and given a new home here in Pennsylvania. Today, I'll attempt to unravel this pivotal thread in American history, seeing how...
And this is when they indoctrinated our elders and our ancestors, yo. This is why you got our people saying life began in Africa. Half of our people are waking up, though. You got people in our communities that believe life began in Africa because a white person said it. And even today, you have people that need white people to say it in order for it to be true. Seriously, it's in the Native community and the Black community. They need a white person, mainly a white person wearing a suit. If they got glasses, even better. But yeah, they need a white person to say it for them to be true.
So many were taken, given new names, and given a new history. We can see that this routine, this calculated
Yeah,
effort,
and that's why they taught us we're primitive and all that, living in the Stone Age. No, our ancestors had gold and silver jewelry with wampum and turquoise. Our people had a culture, a beautiful culture. Look at how many different tribes and how many different languages and songs we had. And we had buildings. Look up the pueblos. Those are literal apartment buildings, little urban cities, yo. Come on.
to knowingly and nefariously alter the history was occurring. It
TikTok.
effectively erased the true origin
to,
of many different locations
Joey
in
I-Zero.
America through the purposeful disillusionment of indigenous traditions, beliefs, and most of all, language and oral tradition, which preserve the truth of America. The United States Indian Industrial School was founded in Carlisle, Pennsylvania in 1879, operating for 39 years, roughly until the end of World War I, when the operation was considered to be complete. It took only about one generation for the history to be altered. However, to fully understand just how anomalous and how nefarious what happened actually was, I believe we must try to trace the origins of this school and this event. There's 3 unique examples here, which I believe set the precedence for the Carlisle School, 2 of which are mentioned in the mainstream narrative, and 1 example which I have personally discovered and shared with you before. During the early 19th century, the state of New York was a mecca for individuals seeking a new life, and with the abolishment of slavery in that state.
Why New York, though? It's because that's where the origin of mankind began. The world's oldest forest is in New York. If it's the world's oldest forest, what does that mean? It's the first garden. And if it's the first garden, what does that mean? It's the Garden of Eden.
The outskirts of New York City.
Also, you got the Finger Lakes in upstate New York, and that's God's handprint because he blessed the land there.
Became home to one of the largest and most affluent African American communities in recorded history. Severely and devilishly played down by European historians and reporters of the 19th century, it's now been proven that Seneca Village was, in fact, a robust and well-to-do community where nearly all the homes were brick and masonry, constructed by the landowners. Later reports during the debate over the construction of Central Park appeared to attempt to make Seneca Village out to be an impoverished area with very little that was worth saving. In reality, Seneca Village had a centuries-old history tied back to the half-free villages of African farmers which were established under Dutch rule.
Half-breed.
Furthermore, one of the key components to the growth of Seneca Village was the renovating or destruction of the nearby York's Hill, a rather ominous mound which once encompassed most of what is today 6th and 7th Avenues between 79th and 86th Street. When this mound, which some people believe had indigenous significance, was leveled, most of the residents being non-European, they moved to Seneca Village to join the already large African American population there. However, the history continues to get stranger. We're told a majority of the indigenous people and others who occupied York's Hill were also employed to construct the Croton Aqueduct, an Egyptian revival-style, massive masonry aqueduct which provided fresh water to nearly the entire city of New York. The Croton Aqueduct is allegedly the reason York's Hill had to be demolished, but it makes me wonder if some sort of ancient fortification did not already exist here. Furthermore, by the census of Seneca Village in 1855, an estimated 1/2 of the population of this secluded yet equally wealthy community were said to be of either German or Irish descent. And the political machine of New York, with roots tied to the Irish famine, known as Tammany Hall, had many members that were born in Seneca Village, including George Washington Plunkett. Furthermore, addressing the alleged lies that are seen in the narrative, almost all maps produced around 1855 limited the number of homes depicted in Seneca Village, usually around the number of 50, and they were often described as being simple wooden houses. Yet excavations, beginning in the early 20th century, but continuing here through modern times, have revealed intricate stone masonry foundations and assortment of materials for brick making, which leads modern scholars to conclude Seneca Village was much larger than European reports from the mid-19th century gave it credit for. Diving into this even further, and why I mention all of this, by the 1840s, rich industrialists of New York had already planned to construct a rather massive park in the city, with the location of Seneca Village chosen to eliminate what the board of directors referred to as a nuisance to the city. Seneca Village was purposefully chosen as the location for Central Park, in part due to its long history with the indigenous people, who long built earthworks throughout New York, but also it was chosen as a way to erase any memory of that earlier history of New York, to upend a community that was growing in size and wealth, an African, Irish, and Germanic community which had started to control much business in that section of the city. Their settlement was destroyed to make way for Central Park. Want to know how I believe that this is all malarkey? Well, reports, maps, scientific studies, all published by Europeans, claim that Seneca Village was home to no more than 1,000 residents living in less than 60 homes. Yet, in official reports from 1853, published by the Central Park Commission, there are over 34,000 occupied lots in and around the land that would become Central Park. 34,000. We're also told it took New York City roughly 2 years to accumulate the funds to pay for these properties. And the current narrative makes sure to note that New York City paid every single landowner in Seneca Village for their land. However, if you dive into that tidbit a little bit further, it reveals that New York City determined only about 20% of the occupants of Seneca Village had gone through the proper procedures to secure their land, meaning an estimated 80% of the occupants of Seneca Village lost their land, received nothing, and then were forcibly removed from the land, only for many of them to be offered jobs in constructing Central Park. While most rejected that offer, attempting to either squat on the land or retreat to other parts of the country, some desperate people accepted the job of destroying their own neighborhoods for the European colonists. This is all verifiable fact. By 1857, the last resident or squatter in Seneca Village had been imprisoned or removed, and the construction of Central Park commenced almost immediately. However, the disenfranchised African Americans were unable to assimilate into New York society the same way that their German and Irish counterparts did. Many freedmen rebelled against the systems imposed on them, having just witnessed their freedoms essentially stripped from them again through eminent domain. As this news spread, the freedmen around the country are said to have began to felt disenfranchised and unhappy, often voicing their concerns, which in return led to the government founding the Hampton Agricultural and Industrial School, known today as Hampton University, the whole way in Virginia. Mind you, and this will be important later, but both New York and Virginia were historically considered to be the domain or the stomping ground of the Susquehannock indigenous people, who helped the colonists to build their earliest settlements. Hampton Industrial School was founded on an ancient site known as Little Scotland, which had formed into one of the largest plantations in Virginia. Little Scotland itself overlooked the Hampton Roads, and the Hampton Industrial School was built on the ruins of this Little Scotland, but it was also only a few miles away from the massive star fort known as Monroe. Star Fort Monroe was a fortified island, for lack of a better term, which for most of its history...
Why haven't I seen a handsome man or beautiful woman amongst the Native Americans? We got the most beautiful people, dude.
Was the main and at times only fortress charged with guarding the Chesapeake Bay and the entrance to the Potomac River. The Susquehannock historically were the first to monitor these areas, as the Chesapeake Bay, the largest bay of its kind in America, is where the Susquehanna River empties. The Susquehanna River, at over 400 miles in length, is the longest river in America that is not open to commercial vessels, and at an average of roughly 1 mile in width, this is also one of the most historically important rivers in all of America. The Hampton Industrial School, although the narrative says it was geared towards all freedmen, appears to have been a way to erase knowledge of the Susquehanna from the northeastern region. Essentially, we're told the United States government captured thousands upon thousands of prisoners of war during the Civil War, relocating them to the secluded Star Fort Monroe. And when that became overrun, they also founded the Grand Contraband Camp of Virginia, another fortified barracks meant to house the spoils of war, in this case, people. What's even stranger here is, this was all being orchestrated by the Union side, the so-called victors. They essentially had captured thousands of men, women, and children, and secretly kept them in camps on military bases. To me, that sounds a lot like enslavement, doesn't it? I mean, the Union, for several years, referred to these captured indigenous and former enslaved people as contraband. It's kind of sickening, but also revealing to what the history actually was at this time. These efforts, from the destruction of ancient indigenous sites and major settlements belonging to indigenous people and freedmen, to the forced labor and forced education of these peoples, with the only alternative to that being an asylum, we can begin to see how it appears this was all a concentrated effort to erase the knowledge, to erase the history. The question becomes why.
There's no way
and
this
how
guy
much
thinks
of the actual
these
narrative
people,
that we
black
have
people
today
in Seneca
can
Village
even
are
be determined to be
indigenous, does he?
genuine. For example, we're told Little Scotland, this place for captured souls which the North refused to free, began to
gonna have my
employ
girl do
in
my
secret
braid.
the American Missionary Association
I'm gonna
to
have you do my
begin to
braid.
attempt to re-educate the former slaves and
That's
indigenous
cool.
people. By 1863, Little Scotland was the site where the Emancipation Proclamation was read for the first time on southern soil, and we're told Little Scotland became a site of pilgrimage for patrons from the north, all the while forcibly housing people on its grounds. To combat this, in 1868, the Hampton Agricultural and Industrial School was founded by the AMA to legitimize this operation. It was a land grant school. Based off of everything we just discussed, it becomes crucial to also mention that Booker T. Washington was educated at the Hampton School and is considered to be its most famous alumni. Booker would go on to reshape African American thought in the early 1900s, quite literally becoming the voice for the colonists who educated him, and he was considered the founder of the Black Elite, a group of wealthy freethinkers in America. But considering where his teachings arose from, we must begin to ask questions. It also goes on to show you how many of the ideas, the new narrative, was presented and being made to be accepted by being forced onto the public by certain individuals. For example, the Hampton School had 277 graduates in the first 10 years that it operated. 260 of them would go on to become teachers, further spreading the Hampton School ideals to other communities. After 20 years, or by 1888, the Hampton School had produced an estimated 600 graduates, with at least 450 of them becoming teachers throughout the country and beyond. Records show that estimates at the time suggested in 1888 alone, over 15,000 American graduates had been...
That girl right there looked native in between the black girl and white girl.
educated by former graduates of the Hampton School. Do you begin to see how easy the new narrative was being spread? By the year 1900, the Hampton School was said to be the wealthiest African American school in the country, producing an improbably large fraction of America's African American influencers and educators. However, the Hampton School wasn't the first to attempt to eradicate the history to form a new narrative that was beneficial to the colonists. In 1818, the Choctaw Academy was formed in what is today Scott County, Kentucky. Its purpose was to educate Choctaw children, specifically boys, in a European education system as to hope to quell their rebellious nature. In truth, it appears the United States used these education systems to manipulate their way into a stronger claim on these landscapes by influencing certain groups to forget their history, forget their traditions, and to forget the importance that they played on the land, forcing them into a, quote, industrial way of thought where, quote, all men were created equal. But really, that seems to me, at least in this context, don't stand up for the truth because it goes against the common good. The Choctaw Academy was, of course, founded by a man of European descent named Richard Mentor Johnson. Having never heard of this man before, I did a little bit more digging, and it turns out Richard Mentor Johnson was from the affluent Johnson family who had purchased their land in Virginia, what is today part of Kentucky, from founding father James Madison. However, a majority of the family wealth appeared to come from the mother's side, a rather mysterious woman named Jemima Suggett, who was considered to have some sort of tie to the indigenous people. However, that's not fully understood today. By 1796, Mentor Johnson was enrolled at Transylvania University, the first college founded west of the Appalachian Mountains. By 1802, Mentor Johnson is described as a leading lawyer in the land of Kentucky, focusing on working pro bono for the poor and disabled. He is also described as one of the leading Freemasons in America, actually being one of the lead conspirators behind the Hunter's Lodge plot, where the Master Freemasons of America planned to overtake the British Canadian government, annexing the country for America. However, most remarkable might be that Richard Mentor Johnson was the first and only vice president that was elected to the office by the United States Senate. But even more so is that within the appearance of these reform schools, these re-education schools, they began with Mentor Johnson's Choctaw School, and it might have been formed with extremely nefarious purposes. For example, Mentor Johnson joined the Kentucky militia during the War of 1812, and it is said that Richard Mentor Johnson was then given credit for directly executing Shawnee Chief and Indigenous leader Tecumseh, causing a ripple effect which transformed American and...
Yeah, but look at how we went to fight. We went to fight. It looked like they went to fight with, like, have a fight. But and then they were going to battle. But he goes up and fucking shoots him.
Indigenous politics. Having formed the Choctaw School in 1818, by 1828, it was discovered that Richard Mentor Johnson had been having inappropriate relationships with many students from the school, and he was heavily attacked in the media when it was discovered he had a long relationship with a woman named Julia Chin, a later student of the Choctaw School who was also enslaved on his property. She was born in 1796 or 1797 and was known to have begun her relationship with Mentor Johnson in 1811. By 1812, she had his first child. According to the narrative, all of this was actually orchestrated by his mother, Jemima Suggett, who also appeared to have inspired him to create the Choctaw School to legitimize this exploitation. This is why Mentor Johnson was the only elected vice president. As Congress and America became well aware of his misdeeds, Johnson still somehow weaseled his way onto the ticket of the Democratic Party alongside Martin Van Buren in 1836. He campaigned on the fact that he had ended the life of Tecumseh and he could do it again to any one of his foes. Johnson did not secure enough votes for the Democratic nomination, while Van Buren did, and Virginia's delegation to the Electoral Congress instead chose to endorse Will Smith of South Carolina as vice president. However, the Senate of the United States, upon Van Buren's victory, chose to instead elect Richard Mentor.
Yo, that proves that we're still at war, yo. We're at war. We are at war. We are living with the enemy, yo. We have been enslaved, yo. We have been enslaved. And the world's best prison is the prison that the prisoners don't know we're in. We gotta wake our fucking people up. We're still at war, yo. It's not over yet.
Johnson, making him the only vice president who was voted into office. I wonder why. Could it be that other politicians of the time also were abusing their power, part of what appeared to be a well-oiled machine that was charged with erasing Indigenous and African American history? Well, that could be the case, but I digress. The narrative also alludes to the Choctaw Academy being Mentor Johnson's own personal venture. However, upon his passing, the American government quickly swept in and took control of the school. The question becomes, how much of that history can be trusted and how much was put in place to make us look the other way? For example, the original stone school building, standing 3 or 4 stories tall, depending on if you count the half-buried bottom floor, still stands in Kentucky, albeit in a severely dilapidated state. At the height of the Choctaw School, around 1830, we are told it was housing more than 100 students from a multitude of different tribes in America, and it set the precedents for the schools that followed. Now, looking at the building, can we imagine that
one of the richest plantation owners and politicians in the Democratic Party, founded a school which housed over 100 students at any given time, all to be educated in the European teachings. All the while he abused the power awarded to him, and all of that was said to have taken place inside this rather small brick and masonry building. Does it really make sense? Are there deeper levels to this building and to the narrative which we are not fully comprehending today? Under the 1830 Indian Removal Act, America appeared to again attempt to sweep everything under the proverbial rug by fully abandoning their projects to assimilate and re-educate freedmen and indigenous people. Then, by 1842, the Choctaw School and all other copycat schools across America shut down. By 1845, there was noted rebellion throughout the indigenous reservations, and by 1861, we have the outbreak of the Civil War. Was it all a calculated timeline meant to erase the true history of America, fueled by industrialists and truly pioneering men, as they were called, but they really had what appeared to be ulterior motives fueled by a government that was hungry for more manifest destiny? You tell me. The best way to inherit something is to make sure the previous owners aren't there anymore while positioning yourself to have the best claim. And that is what America did. The Carlisle Barracks, the staple and premier flagship indigenous school in the world, was founded in Carlisle, PA, about 20 miles outside of Harrisburg in the year 1879. However, again, the history ties back to a much earlier date. The Carlisle School grew from the abandoned ruins of the Carlisle Barracks, a military fortification founded the whole way back in 1757 as the first permanent trade post for settlers attempting to cross the Allegheny Mountains to go west. Whether this post was built by early European soldiers or founded out of an earlier indigenous stronghold, I'll let you decide. But you must be prepared to know that this history will always come full circle. Fort Carlisle, also known as Castle Carlisle or Fort Lowther, was founded in Carlisle by the British during the 7 Years' War. Founded in 1757, Carlisle Castle served as the backdrop for the Forbes expedition. Remember how, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned Pittsburgh and the Star Fort Duquesne serving as a trade hub for indigenous and French cultures? Well, Fort Carlisle was founded to serve as the military headquarters of the British, whose Forbes expedition was the military act I mentioned, which drove the indigenous and French out of the Star Fort, only for the Star Fort to be destroyed and a new Star Fort known as Fort Pitt to be founded in its place. All of that operation was orchestrated from Fort Carlisle, which afterwards was abandoned and destroyed. By 1758, Fort Carlisle was said to have been in ruins. Yet, we're then told, from the American Revolution through the War of 1812, Carlisle began to grow as a major town for travelers attempting to head west, and in such, Carlisle was considered by many to be one of the gateways to the West, which is interesting, as I bet many of you have not heard of Carlisle before. Following American independence, Carlisle was said to be the site where the American forces stashed nearly all of their extra weapons and munitions, being somewhat of a secretive military arsenal. The Hessian Powder Magazine, the oldest building still standing in the Carlisle Barracks, was built for this purpose in 1777. However, what we're told often conflicts. For example, a massive rebellion of the farmers in southern Pennsylvania, focused around the largest farms and stockyards in the country, situated around Lancaster, began after the United States ordered these farmers to pay massive new taxes on whiskey that they distilled. Instead of paying the tax, many Lancastrian farmers and beyond chose to send their goods across the Allegheny Mountains to be sold in lands that were not monitored or maintained by the United States government. This whiskey rebellion led President George Washington to allegedly travel to Carlisle with upwards of 10,000 troops or more. Upon arrival, his first time at the ancient site, he ordered it to be the location of the first and largest military academy in America. However, before construction began, Congress stripped Carlisle of those rights and awarded them to West Point in New York, where West Point Academy was founded. The question becomes, where did all of the massive brick and masonry buildings in Carlisle come from? Because they sort of just appear on the maps beginning in the early 19th century. For example, Carlisle and the barracks were essentially cleared enough for Washington to order the Great Military Academy to be founded here. While that plan failed, we're told by 1801, following George Washington's passing, the government revisited Carlisle, only then purchasing the land completely from William Penn's family. Furthermore, the history doesn't mention any major construction, yet by 1838, when the training center for the Mounted Dragoons of the Army is founded in Carlisle, it's noted that the immense masonry buildings were in a state of disrepair and immediate renovations were needed. By the Civil War, Carlisle was a noted armory and a key location where Union troops would resupply themselves, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles for the provisions that were held at Carlisle. Indeed, often mainstream scholars mention Gettysburg as the northernmost battle of the Civil War, but not only was a series of skirmishes fought in Carlisle after the Confederacy arrived here in 1863, but it was also the location where the infamous quote, "The rebels are coming," was spoken, a warning that was uttered in response to the Confederate troops arriving to the area, which was then published in nearly every major news outlet at the time. Yet, have you ever heard of the Battle of Carlisle before this video? No? Well, furthermore, one of the main targets beyond Carlisle for the Confederacy was the longest bridge in the entire world at that time. And I've covered this before, but it was known as the Columbia-Wrightsville Bridge, which crossed the Susquehanna River. The bridge, measuring well over 1 mile in length, was a covered bridge of an unmatched design, placed on top of dozens of stone piers, somehow placed in a line across the mile-wide river. How this was built in 1812, which is when the foundations date to, is beyond me. Furthermore, many of those foundations still stand today. However, we're told not only did this covered bridge essentially provide the only crossing of the Susquehanna River at that time, which really until the early 1800s, everything on the other side of the Susquehanna River was considered the West or Indigenous territory. But we're also told that this bridge was built with multiple piers, these piers that could actually access the bridge from below. It also contained areas for fishing or general enjoyment and was said to at one point contain an upper deck or upper level that was also meant for relaxation. Today, only one known photograph of that bridge is said to have survived, taken before the bridge was destroyed during the Civil War. Furthermore, while the history doesn't really mention this at all, it seems to point to the longest bridge in the world being destroyed by the Confederates in some sort of nefarious act to end manifest destiny. But it was actually the Union soldiers who apparently burned their own bridge to the ground. Being the most important bridge to their cause, it allegedly stopped the Confederates from crossing further into Pennsylvania. Now, let's talk some coincidences before we wrap this video up and bring everything full circle. The Confederates desperately wanted to control the Susquehanna River. The Susquehanna River also was, by many accounts, the divide between East and West in the earliest portions of Pennsylvania history, with everything on the west coast of the river and beyond belonging to the Susquehannock indigenous people. After first being employed as guards and then workers who helped build the earliest European settlements, the Susquehannock maintained good relations with their European counterparts. The question becomes, when did it all change and why? By the mid to end of the 1600s, Europeans had begun arming the rival tribes of the Susquehannock, looking to remove the Susquehannock from along the river. After a series of convoluted events, which culminated with the Susquehannock also settling the Potomac River Valley, meaning they literally helped found Washington, D.C., and that's also verifiable, the government of Pennsylvania created protected land for the Susquehannock. This is what is key. This is what you need to realize. This is where the experiment began, where the compartmentalizing of the true history began. Pennsylvania created the Conestoga town in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, around the year 1690, the first instance of protected land being created, albeit informally, for an indigenous group. A vast majority of the Susquehannock, wanting to return to their former homeland, moved to the Conestoga town in Lancaster, and the town gained worldwide notoriety, as it appears many of the Susquehannock were inventors or were geniuses and had abilities which exceeded most of the other indigenous societies at this time. For example, inventions like the Conestoga wagon or the covered wagon, the cigar, which was known as a Conestoga or a stogie for short, and the Conestoga repeating rifle, now called a Kentucky rifle, were all created and founded, invented in the Conestoga town in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. These inventions would quite literally reshape the history of America and of all of mankind. Yet the history here is also very clearly manipulated, as we're told many of those inventions most likely had indigenous influence, but they came from the Europeans, as we're told the Susquehannock went extinct by 1763. And this extinction was no accident, as we're told a group of English and Irish colonists by the name of the Paxton Boys marched into the Conestoga town in the dead of night in 1763 and burnt every building to the ground with the occupants inside. Those who survived were then rushed to Lancaster prison for protection, which was then also overrun by the Paxton Boys. By the end of 1763, the Susquehannock people were ruled extinct by the government of Pennsylvania, and all inventions and creations founded by them were passed on to their European counterparts. The Susquehannock, having been the subject of much infamy, had once controlled most of the tri-state area and even further south, and this was documented by Europeans when they first arrived to the region in the 1500s. Modern scholars play off the importance of the Susquehannock, but they quite literally ran an extensive kingdom focused on fortifying settlements, which many were built in star forts or earthen fortifications that rose up with bastions. This is all current narrative fact, so it becomes somewhat remarkable then that in this land the Susquehannock called home, which was repeatedly targeted by different events of destruction, we also have the founding of the Carlisle Barracks, which essentially became the Army's provisional home for numerous decades, surviving as the location where troops would march to from hundreds of miles away just to get these provisions. Now, seeing as the Susquehannock, by some scholars' estimates, are also related to the earlier mound builder culture, which founded numerous hundreds of significant earthworks, especially in Pennsylvania, it is shocking that in one said location, the largest, or one of the largest provisional barracks was founded, seemingly utilizing some of these very same early earthworks in the military fortification. Even more interesting then is following the end of the Civil War, the Carlisle Barracks were removed from being the provisional center for the entire army. And guess which location was then awarded that honor? St. Louis, Missouri. quite literally the final capital city of the mound builder culture. Do you see how this is all related? How it appears for centuries our government, or the European power in America, attempted to essentially reverse engineer a new history by digging up the remnants of the culture that was lost, assimilating what was found into their new timeline, and erasing anything that went against the new narrative. While the Choctaw Academy was founded by Mentor on Choctaw lands in 1871, the United States government ordered the rundown Carlisle Barracks and its immense, abandoned masonry architecture to be transformed into the first boarding school for Indigenous people, which was not founded on Indigenous lands. Yet, given what I just told you about the Susquehannock and the history of South Central Pennsylvania, it comes as no surprise that Carlisle was chosen. The Carlisle Industrial School literally built from the ruins of the Carlisle Barracks itself, built from the ruins of the headquarters of the British Army, looking to capture star forts in the 1700s. If we bring it all full circle, we can see how all of this effort, literally the spirit of a nation, was charged with erasing the true old world history of America. And it worked because the deceit was weaved into every facet of everyday American life. The Carlisle School, according to modern data, operated much akin to a prison, where children were kept as political hostages and often exploited by their European teachers. Take, for example, the case of Mentor Johnson, mentioned earlier, or how the education that was developed in these Indigenous re-education schools would then form the basis for everything that was taught to the Indigenous people moving forward. They sold the new narrative this way, through white lies about the true origin of everything, including the settlements and even the people themselves. Furthermore, we're also told a similar event had been occurring in Seminole, Florida for the previous half a decade, with multiple Indigenous people indentured to serve at Fort Augustine, Florida, where they were awarded their freedom based off their willingness to forget their Indigenous beliefs and teachings and regurgitate the European ones. By 1918 and the end of World War I, the United States Army retook the Carlisle Barracks, and thus they closed down the Carlisle School, instead turning the site into a location for secretive military testing. The Medical Service School of the United States Army was founded on the exact site of the former Carlisle School for Indigenous Re-education. From 1920 until 1946, the Carlisle site was the major location the government used to test military equipment and medical supplies. Reading between the lines, we can assume that means some pretty nefarious things were happening at this location. By World War II, Carlisle was home to many cutting-edge new programs which altered the American psyche and attempted to change warfare forever, including the Army Information School, essentially the Army's media wing for controlling public thought. But we also have the Army Military Police School and the Army Security Agency, both somewhat clandestine organizations which were also formed on the former site of the Carlisle School. I wonder what was actually happening here behind closed doors, and possibly deep underground, in the known subterranean layers of Carlisle that date back to Susquehannock times or earlier. By 1951, Carlisle was made the site of the Army War College, the senior-most educational system in the entire Army. Yet, by 2000, the Army had mostly abandoned Carlisle's lengthy stretch of buildings. By 2005, President George Bush recommended the Carlisle Barracks and all ancient buildings on the site be decommissioned and demolished. However, in a joint venture with the public in Carlisle, the Residential Community Initiative began revitalizing the area in 2006. Since 2006, numerous whistleblowers have come forward revealing information, including documents from the early 1900s, which make clear that the Carlisle School was knowingly operating under somewhat nefarious purposes. For example, Isaiah Wassaquam of the Ottawa Nation produced a cornucopia of evidence suggesting one could not graduate from the Carlisle School without first being engaged or married to a European. And such, Isaiah and many of his contemporaries concluded that the Carlisle School and schools like it were truly intended to erase the true nature of Indigenous history, to whitewash the narrative. It's also of note here that multiple young women who attended these schools were forced into marriages and other situations which completely alienated them from their tribes and their beliefs. For example, most Lakota women were known as great warriors and great hunters within the tribe, and most were said to have suffered from severe depression when forced into the climate of the Carlisle School. Not to mention the forced and arranged marriages and the extracurricular activities involving the teachers, all of which appeared to threaten any sort of truth about what was happening from ever coming to the limelight. Many times the affluent males who attended these schools, like the Carlisle School, were awarded with arranged marriages and entrances into high society, which came with many perks, all of which could be obtained if these men relinquished their Indigenous beliefs and history. Also worth note here is the sheer amount of hardships, both direct and indirect, that occurred at these schools. For example, in recent years, it's come to the attention of many researchers that these schools contain their own private burial grounds. In many instances, these were burial pits akin to burial mounds, just like those of their Indigenous ancestors. As such, in places like the Carlisle School, it's been discovered mass graves where the bodies of dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals have been unearthed, with the question arising, was all of this caused by diseases like tuberculosis, which is what is claimed by the mainstream narrative, or was this the result of a calculated effort to erase those who would not adhere to the new narrative? Were these schools purposely founded or purposely built on top of Native American strongholds to further hide the history? By the year 1900, we're told Indigenous people from all across the Americas, from as far away as Mexico and Canada, had been forcibly sent to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, to attend the premier re-education school in the nation. While the numbers are never anything we can officially go on, which is strange to say when we're discussing a narrative that quite literally involved the rehousing.
My great-grandfather, Johnson Jimerson, went to Carlisle. The oldest Indian school in this country, yo.
And re-education of an entire society of people, it becomes somewhat revealing to know that most of the numbers we have are estimates, assumptions that were made by parties who appeared to have a dog in this proverbial fight. Realistically, we may never know the truth, but we can assume that hundreds, if not thousands of more people than are noted might have been forced into the Carlisle School and forced to give up everything that they knew about themselves, their history, and the old world. Scholars from all across the world, with a large portion coming from Europe, even are said to have traveled to Pennsylvania to visit the Carlisle School and to see how the re-education of the Indigenous people was taking place. Yet by 1913, we're told the principal beliefs of the Carlisle School have been passed on to a handful of other schools across the country, and the necessity for one
Avatar in this bitch
uniform re-education policy came to an end as states began to incorporate their own ways to erase the history and to re-educate those who had been enslaved before. Furthermore, and this kind of is never mentioned in the mainstream narrative, but a majority of the American sports that we are familiar with today, especially football and baseball, grew out of this Carlisle School. The Carlisle School in the early 1900s was considered to have the best athletes in the entire world. For example, the football program of the Carlisle School, and indeed, many of its athletic programs were run by a man named Pop Warner. You may have heard of him before, as the Pop Warner Youth Football Program is today the main youth football program in America. The youth sports programs began as a way to incentivize the Indigenous children at the Carlisle School. However, if we dive further into this, the question arises if these sports didn't actually begin within the Indigenous communities. For example, we know that baseball, the American pastime, stems from a sport that was played around the Indigenous mounds, hence the mound and the base that are in baseball. Pioneers of American athletics like Jim Thorpe were also students of the Carlisle High School and College, and many of the athletes of the Carlisle School helped to attain a level of recognition that made the erasing of the school's history impossible, even though that's what the government attempted to do when they closed down the Carlisle School in 1918. The lands and buildings of the former Carlisle School were then returned to the Carlisle Barracks, and then they were incorporated by the United States Army. The history was purposefully compartmentalized. It was only through these Indigenous American athletes that the history remained relative and mainstream, even into modern times. And it was only in the year 2024 that the Carlisle Barracks were made a national monument by then President Joe Biden. How much of this history can actually be trusted? When we look at the beginning, the removal of the Susquehanna people, forcing them into the Conestoga town, and then them being destroyed within this town. And then we arrive at the Choctaw School, the school for freedmen as well. Both of those schools playing a key role in erasing certain histories, but also areas or schools that would go on to exploit those who attended them. Then we arrive at what we could see as the main driving factor of the early 1900s in assimilating the Indigenous people completely into American culture, and that is the Carlisle School. And it appears to have paved the way for the complete retelling and erasing of pre-European American history. The new education system seemingly put into place to erase the achievements and the importance of what was here before us. But the Carlisle School is one of the greatest examples that somehow, even after the government attempted to hide this history, has remained, and I believe it's a great place for us to begin to look to try to uncover the true nature of American history. Hopefully my research today has done a little bit of justice to this history. I know I'm never going to be able to uncover everything for you, but I've tried to point out the key facets in these narratives. I've tried to come together and show you how all of these different narratives are actually related to one another. I've tried to bring things full circle, and in doing this research, I'd like to think I've done my due diligence in presenting you with different topics that you may have already been familiar with, but connecting them in a way that you might not have done before. And that's all that I'm trying to do on my channel. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you being here, because without
Okay, cool. Guys, we're gonna take a break. That was a good live, yo.
you, this channel...
I love y'all. Escunge. Until we meet again. Remember, connect yourself to your ancestors. Make sure you got your spiritual umbilical cord, y'all. Let them know. It's a Native American haircut. We're bringing back. Wear your regalia. Wear your hair long. If you like it short, get a mohawk or wear the Seneca. Right? If you don't know what the Seneca is, it's a patch of hair in the back. It's a buzz cut like this, and a patch of hair in the back. Or make your own. Make it indigenous, yo. We got our own culture. We got our own culture, yo. You don't need to dress like a black guy or a white guy. We got our own culture. We got our own music. We got our own languages. We are in our lands. We got our own shit.